Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating guest. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, I'm Robert Ricciardelli. I'm based here in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. Really glad to be here and be a part of this interview. So thanks for having me on the show. I come from a background. My parents were born in Italy, so they're immigrants coming to the United States. And my dad raised 7 children, and 21. We've had 21 grandchildren, 30 great grandchildren, and 8 great great grandchildren. My dad just passed away last December at age 100, and he lived a full life all the way throughout. But growing up, I grew up as Italian American, and it really didn't identify as white. I always said check the box, white, and I thought that's weird. I guess when you look at all the different options, I have to choose the white Caucasian box. But growing up, my heroes were, from a young child, were black entertainers, black athletes, the music I loved to listen to, and I really enjoyed the culture. I also had, from a young age, had a real compassion for those that were judged based on their differences. So when you come from a framework or from a family, and I don't know, I think it's God-given or whatever it is, however I was raised, I always had this compassion for all people and never had any notion of differences. You can notice differences. Yeah, I'm a little whiter than they are, or I'm a little darker than they are, or especially in the summer. But at the end of the day, all human beings. And part of my faith was a big part of that too, growing up. I like to say faith versus religion, because even religions can get kind of exclusive, depending on the religion. But growing up, because I had this idea of not being white or black, just being a human who happened to be from an Italian descent, that's how I grew up. And as I got older, I started, continuing to listen to the music I loved, and my friendships were diverse because of that. And in my high school, I even got invited. I think, and to this day, I was the only non-black individual invited to the Black Student Union. I think back in the day they called it Black Student Involvement. And the teacher that put the club together, in my school at the time, was high school. This was probably gosh, 45 years ago, something like that, was probably out of 1,800 students, we might have had maybe 30 Black students. So I was part of this 30 person club. And they said I could come in and join them because I really wasn't white and I could dance. And we still kind of joke about that. But again, it's prepared the way for what I would be doing in the future. I got into sales as a young adult. I was good at it, mainly because people used to say, well, you can sell ice to Eskimos. Why would you sell ice to Eskimos? They have ice. But I really was there to serve them at their point of need. So I'd find out what their need was, and depending on the company I was working with, we'd provide a solution for those needs. Later on in life, I started tapping into my faith a little bit more. And I'm married and I have 2 adult sons, and I have a couple grandchildren here in the Seattle area as well. But my wife and I started attending church together, getting involved. At one point, we had coming to our home every week about 50 or 60 folks coming to our home. They weren't from our church. They're from a variety of churches, and we had atheists, and we had all kinds of folks coming to our home because I didn't look at it as like an extension of church. It was an extension of my community. And we talked about faith. We talked about other things that we deal with in life. But people enjoyed it, and they come to me and they go, Rob, we got more out of your home group than we get out of the, 7 Sundays in a row, because typically religion has a format, and it's very little time for someone to actually share what's on their heart. And my home group, we gave everybody time to share what's on their heart and people to listen to those things. So after that, I began to blog, and back then they didn't have actually the blogs we have today. We had email lists back in the late 90s. So I had a little email list, and I began to write things, little concepts about diversity, about faith, about collective humanity. And I began to write on these things, and people wanted to follow. They said, hey, I want to be on your list. I've got this newsletter sent to me, and I want to be on your list. And so it grew from just family and friends to 300 on the list to 30,000 to over 150,000. And this happened within a few years. Because that was happening, and because whatever I was saying resonated with people's hearts, they began to ask me to come speak to them. So I actually spoke at a few churches in Sydney, Australia. And I've been to 17 countries, South Africa 5 times. And I would speak on some of these concepts. I would work with leaders. I would teach them. This was not my job. This was whenever I had time. I'd take vacations. I was working for a company selling computer products and office products. And every time I had a time, I had a week or 10 days, I'm off to the Philippines or South Africa. The longest stint was a month in South Africa. But most of them were week, 10 days, 2 weeks. And then that continued to form until I realized I'm not making any money doing this. I need to find a way to make money doing this. And so eventually, I started coaching and doing other things. I left my job to try to do it full time, did that for about 5 years. And then since came back and did a few startups, a couple failed startups. You learn through those failures. And then now today I work for a company that works for outsourcing CFOs, accounting, HR, pretty much anything essential that a startup business would need, including benefits and business insurance. That's my company, Escalon. It's not my company. I work for this company, provides. And so we have 1,700 CFOs, controllers, accountants, HR professionals, helping these startups with their businesses. My job is to find their need and then put in the right team for those needs. And that's been great because I'm learning about all these great innovations from these small companies and then they grow into big companies. And so I get to watch some of these companies and be a part of their journey. But this whole thing about DEI, I now am I'm part of a board for homeward pet adoption in Woodinville, Washington, and we rescued over 3,500 pets last year and found homes for them. So it's a really good work that they're doing. I'm really proud to be a part of it. But we're going through a DEI assessment on our own, and there's so many things to look at. Like, okay, do we say this is what you must do? How do we train each individual? Because each individual has a whole life of experience, and you have to really talk to each individual. You can't really put this complete framework. You can set boundaries and things like that. So it's been really interesting to go through the DEI experience on a broader scale with a nonprofit. And I've seen other companies struggle with it. And the biggest struggle is how everyone has different perceptions. And no one pretends to think that in my lifetime, we're gonna eradicate racism. Nobody thinks that. So how do we handle it? What comes down to us individuals. And that's where we are today. So I'm happy to share more with you.
Wow. What a journey you've been on, Rob. The fascinating thing is when people talk about diversity, the instant reaction is it's either you're black or you're white, and that's where diversity stops. But when you look at the intersectional lens of individuals, we are all diverse, right? It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you're made up of so many different layers. Now, when I moved to New Zealand, I identify as being a Black Kiwi. New Zealand is my country of citizenship. It's the longest place I've lived in the world. I grew up in Zimbabwe. I studied in London. I lived in Norway, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, United States, 7 other countries. But I bring to any organization all of that life experience. Like, you've been to 17 countries, which is absolutely incredible. So let's go back to the beginning. You've had more than 25 years experience in sales and leadership, and having built an extensive network, 30,000 people on LinkedIn. Can you walk us through your journey and how it led you to where you are, especially in harnessing the power of LinkedIn? You and I connected because of LinkedIn, and a lot of people don't know how to make those authentic connections.
Yeah, those are great questions. I want to say one thing. I didn't know you were from Zimbabwe, and we spent about 10 days in Harare and worked with the community there, and it was one of our favorite communities to work with.
Oh, fantastic.
One of my good friends there named Strive Masiwa.
I know Strive Masiwa, yes.
He and his wife are the ones that funded us to go several times to Africa. And so, as you know his story. So that's a sidebar. Anyway,
we talk about him, because I don't know him personally, but that's somebody I would love to interview on this podcast.
Yeah. So we had. I've always been connecting. I always connected. I've been, when you're a connector and you have a passion for it, and I had since I was younger, you often can be misunderstood. One of the values of people who are connectors is they're authentic. They desire to live authentically, and when you desire to live authentically, you let your heart out there, and so you can be hurt, and actually that's okay, because what I found is people that get hurt and don't want to feel it can then get bitter, and then they're not connecting as often, or they don't want to reach out anymore. I've been hurt a lot, but I don't absorb it. I don't take it personally. You heard the term years ago, hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people, yes.
So usually if you're getting hurt, it's somebody who's hurting. And if you can tap into the compassion for those that are hurting, no matter how much they've hurt you, but understand, as much as you felt pain, they're feeling it 10 times worse. That's why they are how they are. So if you can tap into that, you can absorb a lot of pain, because, and I don't mean abuse, because that's a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
When I was in South Africa, I spoke to the Women's Aglow of South Africa, 350 women. I was the main speaker, and and a lot of those women were going through many forms of abuse,
Yeah.
and many of them from their husbands, who actually were with many other wives and other women. So I told them God wanted them to be free, that God looked at them as princesses, and that's who they are, and that they deserve to be treated as such. And so many of them came to me, are you saying divorce? I go, if that's what it takes for you to be free, yes, I'm saying divorce, which, ministers aren't supposed to say those type of things. I never, like I said, I tap into faith, and I tap into something bigger than religion. And when
Yeah.
the truth can really come out in a powerful way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now let's go a little bit towards your ideas around business.
Yeah.
I know that you believe that most startups and small to medium businesses can save up to 60% by outsourcing. Why do you think outsourcing is such a critical element to businesses today, especially in finance and HR sectors? And how does bringing in diverse individuals through outsourcing help your business as well?
Those are great points. When you hire somebody, first of all, you got to find the right hire. And if you don't get the right person hired, then you've got to let go of that person you just hired. So there's costs involved. There's costs involved in recruiting. There's costs involved in training, retraining because you got a new hire, and outsourcing or benefits. Benefits are 25 to 30% of anywhere from 18 to 28 to 30% of what you're paying that person on top of that. So with outsourcing, there's no benefit costs. You're not paying for benefits. You're hiring someone who's already trained, and you can and within minutes or when you first engage with them, you can tell whether or not they're going to do the work that you hired them to do. And so replacing them, getting somebody else involved is not that difficult. Also, outsourcing, oftentimes one of the key things of outsourcing is you come in as a team. So somebody's sick, your business doesn't drop off, your accounting doesn't drop off because there's another team member to fill it. So you're not hiring one person, you're hiring a team, a collective team that comes in to perform those duties that you need performed. And same thing to your question on the outsourcing of the DEI. The nice thing about outsourcing is you can specifically target, you can't hire a whole department, but you can target a solution you need, whether it's a DEI solution, HR solution, accounting solution. You can bring them in fractionally. Yeah, you might not need a CFO full time. You can't afford a CFO full time, but you can bring in a CFO for a few hours a month, and that's effective.
That's fantastic. Now, I know that you have a passion for building businesses and social capital. How do you define social capital? And how has your extensive network played a role in the success of the businesses you've worked with?
Yeah, I think social capital begins and remains through relationship, through trusted relationships, through being a trusted advisor. People know you, they recommend you, they've trusted you, they've seen you come through, they've seen how you respond during challenging times in their own lives or their own businesses, and that you're building social capital there. Same thing with these social platforms, right? You have people that come on board because they see this side of you that's authentic, that's real, someone they can touch. How it plays out in businesses is, again, the referrals. My business, there's very seldom do I have to go out and target a business directly. I'm getting bankers, attorneys, HR professionals, business community leaders that refer me saying, oh, you need to talk to Rob because he can take care of this, this, and this. So having that social capital and having that network allows you to not have to go and knock on doors like maybe you did when you were younger, like I did. And you can rely on your network.
I love that. Your network is your net worth, right?
Yeah,
It's everything. It's
that's a good
everything.
point.
Now, I have just recently registered my first tech startup, and I am struggling to get funding, to attract the right investors. I've got so many strikes going against me. One, I'm Black. Two, I'm in tech. Three, I'm 56. When you are working with startups and they start,
And four, you're a woman.
and four, I'm a woman. Yes, sorry, I forgot. So, what are the common financial and HR challenges that startups face? And how does early growth services help address these challenges?
Yeah, so again, the biggest challenge is funding, right? Funding and budget and all those things, right? Until you get funded, you're bootstrapping, you're wearing six hats at once. So we try to replace some of those hats as early as possible, so you can do what you need to do, which oftentimes is building revenue. Going out in the community so that you can build the revenue and create those partnerships. And so oftentimes the first thing that we do is take on their accounting because you need to have good books. You need to have good, when people want to do their due diligence to because you want to raise capital, they're going to look at your books. So you want to have them done according to GAAP. In the U.S., we have what they call U.S. GAAP accounting, and then the other piece of it is our CFOs. We have 75 CFOs, and all of them are verticalized, meaning they have experience in certain areas: SaaS, consumer good products, crypto, AI, any biotech. So when we engage with a client, having a CFO on your team, even for a couple hours a month, that CFO is your CFO. They will talk to investors. They will introduce you to investors. They'll make sure that that your pitch is exactly what investors want to see, and they can be a real asset in your ability to raise funds.
I love that. Now, I know that you host events like Meet a VC and partner with incubators and accelerators. Why is it essential for startups to be actively involved in such events and communities?
Again, we talked about the network. Is your net worth is your network, and it's building networks. And so when we do the Meet the VC, we're introducing somebody, and then we're typically bringing in a partner to advertise. We call them our sponsor. In this Meet the VCs, we're not charging the sponsor any money. It's online. We're paying the cost for that, but we're introducing our sponsors, our partners, and those partners enjoy it because now they're getting they get to share what they do, and they get to be introduced to, at times we get 70 to over 100 people on these Meet the VCs. So a lot of them are founders. Some are service team members, but no matter where they're coming from, now your network is growing.
I love that. Yeah, and unless you're in the room and rubbing shoulders with these people or people like you, you don't even know. You might bump into another startup who tells you they've met someone. So that whole networking aspect is absolutely crucial.
Yes, absolutely. And the ones that are successful are the ones that go out and do it. Because there's one thing online, you can do a lot online. COVID's over now. And the ones that are becoming the most successful actually are showing up. I show up as often as I can to these invitations, the bankers, attorneys, or whatever networks that are happening. And I try to show up 2 to 3 times a week. So it's not easy. It's work, but it's also
It is work.
enjoyable. Yeah.
does pay off in the end.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little bit about risk and innovation. I know that you believe that business leaders should take qualified risks and be willing to disrupt existing solutions. Can you share an example from your career where taking a risk led to a significant innovation or growth?
Yeah, I probably run into so many of them, it's hard to think of the one. But when you think about technology, that's probably a good place to start. There's a lot of technology out there, and there's a lot of technology that provides different solutions. In fact, there's not a lot of new technology that's providing a solution that isn't already out there. Almost all the solutions people are looking for, you can probably find out there. What happens is, and I think it's, talking, I don't want to talk specifically about a founder, but when someone's saying, okay, this existing technology is here, but I can do better, I can make it better. That's the innovation part. And so you're seeing, companies, and one example would be Netflix. I remember when Netflix first came out, the Blockbuster was the big thing, right? And they're doing this online. Why do I even want my CDs mailed to me when I can, and then Netflix continued to innovate to where they are today and on top of the mountain when it comes to media. So I think it's the risk. It really comes from the founder that says, I can do that. I have a solution that can make this a little bit better. And it's a risk because you're going against the existing system, right? You're going against the thing. Even in my own life, I was part of a system, could be a religion or could be other companies that I worked for. It's a risk to jump out on your own and go from a nice salary and a nice paycheck to starting a company. And in my cases, two of the startups I started, was a part of startup, failed. And but I took a risk because I believed in what they were doing. And there's a lot of reasons it failed. So I never took it personally because there was some back end reasons of why they failed. So it's always a risk. But I think if you don't take the risk, you're never going to get the reward. And you're probably not, you might miss, and it's not from a judgment perspective, but you might miss what you actually were called to do.
Yeah. Now, diversity, equity, and inclusion are critical in today's business landscape. How do you integrate DEI principles into your work, and how has it impacted the businesses you collaborate with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'm more and more thinking it comes down to individuals because like I said earlier, I've seen companies try to install DEI, which is good because they're doing something, right? Doing nothing does help anybody. But it comes down to individuals saying, I want to be a change agent in my world. I see the challenges out there. I see big government not making the changes they need. A good example is what's happening in the state of Maine right now with that killer who in one night killed more people than the previous 15 years combined because of the certain gun laws we have here. So I'm not a political person. I don't get too heavy in politics, but really you can from top down try to enforce certain laws. But you can see in America, nobody had a clue of how bigotry and racism was still brewing underneath until we had a president, Donald Trump, that kind of instigated some of that to happen. Some of the conversations and some of the things that that administration did open the door for some of these things. So it's a hard question. I think every organization needs to protect all their people, and they're greater if they're diverse. You're going to find greater organizations. The greatest organizations are the most diverse organizations. because
Yeah,
that's the beauty of of humanity, the collective of humanity.
that's awesome. Now, just listening to you speak, I know that your faith has been a very big part of your work and your interaction with people and what you do. Let's have a little thought experiment. I'm going to take you back to your formative years, to the young man who went out into the world of business. If you could go back and give him three nuggets of wisdom based on what you've learned up until this point, just in case there is somebody who's listening to this podcast thinking about going into business, what would those three nuggets of wisdom be?
First one would probably be look at your life as a season, because one of the challenges of today is, and when I've coached people, is that they look at what they're going through as something that will never change. And that's impossible. Things evolve, things change. So if you look at the season you're going through right now, whether you're young or old, it's a season. It could be a long season, but it's a season. If you look at it as a season, seasons change. So, so that's one, is understanding that you're going through a season. It might be a tough and challenging season. It's just a season. It's not for the rest of your life. So that's a lie to think that seasons don't change. Second thing is oftentimes we get unsettled. I often look at being unsettled is typically the precipice of being resettled. So when you feel like things are being shaken, there's probably a reason, because you're about to move into either a new season or a new situation for you. So and I'll give you an example. One of my sisters, all she could ever talk about was her church. Every time you'd see her, oh, pastor this, pastor, and that's all she'd talk about. One day she stopped talking about it, and she was kind of unsettled with that church for some reason. Well, a few weeks later, her husband said, hey, honey, I got this promotion, and we're going to be moving to Kansas City. And she was open to it because she had been unsettled. If she hadn't been unsettled, she'd absolutely put up a fight about moving, because that church was her everything. So I welcome the unsettling times, because there's probably a chance you're going to be resettled to something even better. And then I think the other big thing, and probably everyone's heard this before, forgive rapidly, forgive quickly, because if you hold on to things, it's not good for you. And so whatever happened to you, it continues to happen to you because you didn't let it go. Forgiveness does not mean you have to have a relationship with that person. It just means you're letting it go. You're forgiving them. I don't want it. Doesn't mean you're forgetting the injury that took place. You're just letting it go. And the more you can process that and let it go and forgive, the better your life's going to be going forward. So those are three good ones, but there's probably other ones.
Wow. Some really good tips there. Now, let's now have the thought experiment in the opposite direction. I'm going to take you into your future. You're now 90 years old. You're sitting in your rocking chair, surrounded by your children and your grandchildren. If I could teleport you there right now to go and have a conversation with the future you, based on how you're living your life, what would you say to this wise man who's led you to that point?
What I would say that the wise 90-year-old me, I would say, thank you. we made it. We made it to 90. Let's go to 100. I would say probably just good job, because look at the love you've given out, and look at all the love that's been poured into you all these 90 years, and all the things that you knew were true when you acted upon them. This is your reward. And the things that you misstepped and you had stumbled a few times, those are forgiven. You've forgiven yourself, and here you have your reward. So yeah, that's probably what I would think about saying.
Robert, thank you so much for coming online today and sharing your knowledge, your skills with us. It's a real honor to have met you. I feel like I have met a brother from another mother, and this is just the beginning of a friendship and a relationship that will last. Thank you so much.
I agree 100%. Thank you for finding me. I call that could be a divine inspiration to find me. So that was great. And glad we're connected. And I think we are going to be friends for life. So thank you for the time.
Absolute honor. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is bringing people from all over the world, showing through an intersectional lens the magic of diversity, that we are all different, but we are all the same. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And bye for now. Thanks again, Robert.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open,